Most people think humans domesticated cats. But that may not be what happened at all. Dogs joined humans. They were bred, trained, and gradually shaped into companions. Cats followed a very different path. They weren't recruited. They weren't ordered. They weren't even particularly interested in pleasing us. Instead, they seemed to have looked at human civilization, noticed an opportunity, and decided to move in. Which raises a strange question. Did humans keep cats? Or did cats keep humans? To answer that, we need to go back about 10,000 years, to a time when cats wanted absolutely nothing to do with us. Long before cities, kingdoms, or written language, humans were making one of the biggest changes in their history. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers. They followed animals, gathered plants, and moved constantly across the landscape. Then something changed. In several parts of the world, humans began farming. Instead of chasing food, they started growing it. At first, this sounded like a great idea. Plant grain. Harvest grain. Store grain. Simple. Except there was a problem. Actually, millions of problems. Because wherever humans stored grain, mice appeared. Lots of mice. Stored food was basically a giant invitation for rodents. And once mice discovered these early farming villages, they moved in fast. For humans, this was a disaster. The grain they spent months growing could disappear surprisingly quickly. But humans weren't the only animals paying attention. Somewhere nearby, another creature noticed the sudden explosion of rodents. A small wild predator. Quiet. Patient. And extremely good at hunting mice. The African wildcat. Unlike wolves, which lived and hunted in packs, wildcats were solitary animals. They didn't need humans. They didn't cooperate with humans. They didn't rely on anyone. But they did like easy meals. And early human settlements were becoming giant mouse buffet. Imagine being a wildcat. For generations, finding food required constant hunting. Then suddenly, strange upright creatures begin building villages filled with rodents. From a cat's perspective, this was incredible. The mice came to the humans. And the cats followed the mice. The first step toward domestication may have started with nothing more than convenience. Humans probably didn't invite cats into their villages. Cats invited themselves. And here's the interesting part. Humans benefited too. The cats reduced rodent populations. The rodents threatened food supplies. So the presence of cats made life easier. Neither species planned this relationship. It simply worked. Over time, the boldest cats stayed closer to human settlements. The most fearful cats stayed away. Generation after generation, natural selection slowly favored cats that could tolerate human presence. Not love humans. Not obey humans. Just tolerate them. And that's a very important distinction. Because unlike dogs, cats never underwent the same dramatic transformation. Dogs changed enormously. Wolves became companions. Their bodies changed. Their behavior changed. Their faces changed. Cats barely changed at all. In fact, your house cat today is still remarkably similar to its wild ancestors. Genetically, the difference between a domestic cat and an African wildcat is surprisingly small. Which means something unusual happened. Cats became domesticated without ever becoming fully dependent on humans. And archaeologists have found evidence supporting this story. In 2004, researchers made a remarkable discovery on the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. They uncovered a grave that was about 9,500 years old. Inside was a human buried beside a cat. This might not sound extraordinary today, but at the time, it was shocking. Cats aren't native to Cyprus. The only way a cat could have reached the island was if humans brought it there. Think about that. Someone thousands of years ago cared enough about a cat to transport it across open water. And when that cat died, it was buried alongside a human. That suggests the relationship had already become something more than simple pest control. By this point, humans and cats had begun sharing their lives. But the story was only getting started. A few thousand years later, cats achieved something no other animal had managed. They conquered ancient Egypt. Or maybe ancient Egypt became obsessed with them. Egyptian civilization loved cats. Not just as useful animals. As sacred animals. Cats protected grain stores from rodents and snakes. They became symbols of protection, fertility, and good fortune. Eventually, cats became associated with bastet, a goddess often depicted with feline features. Killing a cat, even accidentally, could result in severe punishment. Some families even mourned dead cats as if they were relatives. Archaeologists have discovered enormous cat cemeteries containing thousands of mummified cats. Think about how extraordinary that is. A creature that originally wandered into human settlements looking for mice had become one of the most respected animals in an entire civilization. And yet, despite all this admiration, cats never fully surrendered their independence. Dogs evolved to look toward humans for guidance. Cats did something different. They adapted just enough to live alongside us while keeping much of their original nature intact. This is why cat behavior often feels so different from dog behavior. A dog usually wants approval. A cat usually wants options. Dogs evolved in cooperative packs. Cats evolved as solitary hunters. Those evolutionary histories still shape their behavior today. When your cat stares silently out a window, it's not being mysterious for dramatic effect. It's doing what its ancestors did for thousands of years. Watching, waiting, evaluating. The instincts remain. Even modern house cats still display behaviors inherited from ancient wildcats. They stalk toys. They pounce on moving objects. They hide. They patrol territory. They hunt even when they aren't hungry. Inside every house cat is a predator perfectly designed for catching small prey. The only difference is that today's prey might be a feather toy instead of a mouse. But here's the strangest part. The relationship between humans and cats may be one of the few partnerships in history where both sides got almost exactly what they wanted. Humans gained pest control. Cats gained reliable hunting grounds. Humans provided shelter. Cats provided protection for food supplies. Neither side needed to completely change. Neither side completely dominated the other. It was less like ownership and more like a negotiation that lasted thousands of years. And maybe that's why cats remain so fascinating. Even after thousands of years living beside us, they still feel slightly wild. A dog often feels like a member of the family. A cat sometimes feels like a visitor who decided to stay. One that pays rent in mouse control. The truth is, cats never signed up to serve humanity. They never pulled sleds. They never guarded villages. They never herded livestock. Instead, they found a niche that worked for both species and quietly built one of the most successful relationships in human history. Today, there are hundreds of millions of cats living around the world. They sleep on our beds, sit on our keyboards, knock objects off tables, and somehow convince us to organize our lives around them. And it all started because a small wild predator followed a mouse into a farming village thousands of years ago. So the next time your cat ignores you completely, remember this. That isn't a failure of domestication. That might actually be the entire point. Because unlike dogs, which joined humans, cats made a deal with us. And after nearly 10,000 years, they're still getting the better end of it.